What begins to change when someone reaches $100,000 is not usually their lifestyle, their car, or even their daily routine. In many cases, the outside world looks almost identical. They still wake up at the same time, commute through the same traffic, buy groceries in the same stores, and sit in the same restaurants scrolling through the same financial headlines as everyone else. But internally, something subtle starts to shift, because for the first time, money begins behaving differently. Up to a certain point, most people experience money as something temporary. Income arrives, obligations consume it, and the cycle repeats with almost mathematical precision. The system feels linear. Hours go in, money comes out, bills remove it, and the balance resets again. But somewhere around the six-figure threshold, money slowly starts transforming from survival fuel into stored momentum, and that psychological transition changes how people perceive risk, time, opportunity, and even identity itself. The reason this threshold feels so emotionally powerful is not because $100,000 guarantees security. In many modern cities, it absolutely does not. Housing costs alone can erase the illusion of financial comfort surprisingly fast. What matters instead is that this number represents a structural turning point inside the mathematics of accumulation. Below this threshold, growth is usually dominated by contribution. Above it, growth increasingly becomes influenced by the behavior of the capital itself. That distinction sounds small on paper, but psychologically it is enormous because it changes the relationship between effort and progress. Imagine two individuals investing at the same annual return rate. One has $5,000 invested, while another has $100,000. If the market rises 10% over a year, the first investor gains $500, while the second gains $10,000. Both technically achieved the same percentage return, yet emotionally the experience feels completely different because one person sees movement while the other sees acceleration. The larger portfolio begins creating outcomes that resemble income generated without direct labor, and the human brain reacts strongly to that realization. People begin paying closer attention to economic cycles, inflation, interest rates, taxation, and long-term planning, because they can now visibly observe these forces acting upon their lives in measurable ways. This is where financial psychology becomes more interesting than finance itself. Human beings rarely think in pure numbers. They think in emotional ratios. A $10,000 market fluctuation feels catastrophic to someone with $15,000 invested, but relatively manageable to someone with $500,000. The objective number matters less than the perceived threat to stability. As wealth grows, emotional volatility often decreases because uncertainty consumes a smaller percentage of total resources. This is one reason financially stable individuals frequently appear calmer during economic turbulence. It is not necessarily because they possess superior intelligence or discipline. In many cases, they simply have more margin for error, and margin changes behavior. Modern economies quietly reward people who possess this margin. A person with financial reserves can wait for opportunities instead of reacting desperately to circumstances. They can survive layoffs longer, negotiate better, avoid high-interest debt, and tolerate temporary discomfort without immediate collapse. Meanwhile, individuals living near zero flexibility often experience every unexpected expense as an emergency. The result is a widening psychological gap between groups experiencing the same economy under completely different conditions. One group experiences time as pressure. The other begins experiencing time as leverage. Historically, these wealth thresholds have existed in almost every economic system. In agricultural societies, land ownership created a similar divide because land produced output continuously regardless of whether the owner physically labored every hour. During the industrial era, factories and machinery amplified this effect by allowing capital to generate productivity at scales human labor alone could never match. In the modern financial era, invested capital performs a comparable function. Assets work continuously through dividends, appreciation, yield, and compounding, while human labor remains constrained by biological limits like energy, health, and time. This is why compounding feels almost invisible at first and then suddenly overwhelming later. Early accumulation is painfully slow because small bases produce small outputs. The first years often feel discouraging precisely because the mathematics have not yet reached meaningful scale. Someone saving diligently may feel like they are making almost no progress despite responsible behavior. But compounding is not linear. It behaves more like pressure building quietly inside a system before becoming noticeable. Once the base grows large enough, the annual changes begin exceeding what once required months of labor, and this alters motivation itself. Interestingly, reaching $100,000 also changes how people interpret consumption. Before meaningful asset accumulation, purchases often function psychologically as relief or reward because daily life feels dominated by financial limitation. Spending creates temporary emotional expansion. But after certain thresholds, excessive consumption can begin feeling like interference against future flexibility. The same person who once celebrated spending may later derive greater satisfaction from preserving optionality. This does not mean wealthy individuals stop consuming. Rather, many begin prioritizing control over appearance because control compounds while appearance depreciates. Behavioral economists often discuss the concept of hedonic adaptation, which describes how humans quickly normalize improvements in lifestyle. A salary increase initially feels transformative, but eventually becomes emotionally ordinary. The same thing happens with wealth thresholds. $100,000 feels monumental until it becomes familiar, and then the mind quietly shifts the target again. This is why financial satisfaction cannot rely entirely on numerical milestones. Human psychology constantly recalibrates expectations upward, especially within environments saturated by comparison and social signaling. Social media intensifies this effect dramatically because people are continuously exposed to exaggerated representations of wealth. Private jets, luxury apartments, expensive watches, and curated lifestyles distort perceptions of what financial normality actually looks like. Someone reaching a legitimate financial milestone may still feel behind because the reference points themselves have become unrealistic. Historically, humans compared themselves to relatively small communities. Today they compare themselves against globally optimized highlight reels designed to maximize attention. If you found this perspective valuable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Each week we explore the psychology of wealth, investing, financial systems, and the habits that shape long-term success. And remember, building wealth is not about appearing rich. It's about creating the freedom to make better decisions, pursue better opportunities, and live with greater control over your future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.